in a quiet village of 1682, where the only light came from candles, and the nights stretched longer than dreams. Tonight, I'll tell you the story of a young woman married to a man she had never met, in a wooden house, far from everything. She knew what followed was not just marriage, but a slow unfolding of trust, silence, winter, and eventually, love. This is not a loud story, it's a gentle one that will carry you into the past and, maybe, if you let it, into sleep. Close your eyes, and let the year 1682 begin. The cold wind rustles the window curtains. Leaves fall gently outside. Shadows stretch across the ground. The village of Silent Haven sleeps in silence. Inside a small wooden cottage, Elizabeth sits quietly. She is 20 years old, wearing a linen gown, her hands gently folded in her lap. She sits by the window, watching her fingers, lost in thought. There is something distant in her eyes. Something unknown. Tomorrow is her wedding day. She will marry Jonathan, a man 15 years older than her. Jonathan is 35. He is a carpenter, a quiet, steady man. His first wife died 2 winters ago. Elizabeth barely knows him. They have spoken only a few times, always in passing. But in this time, marriage was not about love. It was duty. The candle flickers on the table beside her. She opens her journal and writes softly, "Tomorrow, I become someone's wife." Her chest rises slowly. The wind outside hums through the trees. From far away, the church bell rings soft. Slow. 1.2.3. Her mother's voice floats from the hearth. Before sunrise, we must be at the church. Being a wife means more than a home. It means honor. Elizabeth nods. Quietly, she turns to the window once more. The moon hides behind the clouds. The shadows of trees sway across the dirt road. She cannot sleep. She wonders, where is Jonathan tonight? Is he asleep, or like me, is he awake? The next morning. The air is colder now. Mist covers the ground like a blanket. Elizabeth walks with her family to the church. No one speaks. Their shoes press into the earth softly. Step by step, Jonathan waits at the gate, wearing a dark gray coat and hat. His eyes calm, but distant. The church door creaks open. Inside, the air is still. Candles burn in quiet rows along the wall. The pastor speaks in a low voice. "We gather here today to bind these 2 souls." Silence. Elizabeth answers softly, "Yes." Jonathan follows, "Yes." No music, no applause. Only stillness. And in that stillness, a new life begins. Night after the wedding. Elizabeth sits in Jonathan's home, a wooden room, dimly lit books stacked in the corner, a thin curtain over the small window. Moonlight spills across the floor. Jonathan stands by the doorway. He speaks gently. "Are you afraid?" Elizabeth replies in a whisper, "No, I mean, a little." He nods slowly. "I feel it too. You're beginning something new, and I'm learning to let go of the past." They sit quietly. Outside, snow begins to fall. The wind whistles past the chimney, and inside, only silence. A single candle glows. A life begins between light and shadow. The first night after the wedding, Elizabeth sits on the edge of a wooden bed. The room glows softly in candlelight. Shadows stretch across the wooden floor. There is no sound, only the faint smell of burning wood. Jonathan is making tea with hot water. Steam rises slowly from the clay cup. He hands her one and speaks gently. Do you like cinnamon? Elizabeth nods and whispers, yes. My mother used to make it. Jonathan smiles. My mother too. Always in the coldest mornings. The steam drifts through the room. A quiet warmth fills the space. Elizabeth takes a sip. Her shoulders begin to relax. This is a new place. A man she barely knows. A life not yet understood. But like winter it must be learned slowly. In the morning, birdsong wakes her. Snow lies over fallen. Leaves outside. The wooden floor chills her bare feet. Jonathan is still asleep. Elizabeth quietly opens the curtain. The sun rises through a misty sky. Its soft light warms her face. In this village, the day after marriage carries a tradition. The new bride visits the elder women of the community. They teach her the ways of the home, how to shape bread, wash linen, and make candles. Elizabeth walks down the path, covered in her shawl. People look, but no one speaks. One elderly woman approaches and says, "You are one of us now." She leads Elizabeth into a dim, low room. There is a stone oven in the corner. Iron pots warm over the fire. The woman smiles. A home stays warm through its hearth, and a marriage stays warm through its wife. Elizabeth says nothing, but her heart is heavy with thoughts. By evening, she returns home. Jonathan is outside, splitting firewood. Sweat lines his brow. He smiles and says, "How was your day?" Elizabeth pauses, then softly says, "New, strange, but not bad." Jonathan nods. This is only the beginning. That night they eat together. Simple bread made of rice, with honey on the side. Jonathan sits across the table. He glances at Elizabeth now and then. He says nothing, but his silence is filled with effort. Elizabeth feels it too. A relationship cannot be forced, but it can grow slowly, like firewood that takes time to catch the flame. Later, they sit by the window. Cold air drifts in through the wooden cracks. A distant fox calls into the night. Jonathan reads from an old book. Elizabeth sits under a thick quilt, fingers tucked in. She asks, "Your first wife, what was she like?" Jonathan pauses, then says softly, "Quiet, kind, full of hope, but winter took her. One night she had a fever. She never woke up." Elizabeth lowers her gaze. She doesn't speak, but her heart whispers, "Can I take her place?" Jonathan looks at her and says, "You're not here to replace her. You're here to begin something new." Tears fill Elizabeth's eyes. She doesn't know why, only that it feels lighter now. Outside, the snow still falls. Inside, the air is calm. The candle flickers gently. A new bond begins to form, without noise, without rush, only understanding, only stillness. In a quiet winter village, inside an old wooden home, a new life is beginning. Winter is slowly fading. There's a soft scent of spring in the air. Snow begins to melt on the forest. Tiny buds bloom on sleeping trees. The wooden home no longer feels cold in the mornings. Sunlight slips through the window, warming the bed. One morning, Elizabeth wakes to the fluttering of a sparrow. She smiles softly. Jonathan beside her asks, "What is it?" Elizabeth replies, "The bird thinks the window is its home." Jonathan smiles faintly. There is warmth in that smile, a warmth winter never brought. One day, while sweeping the floor, Elizabeth finds an old wooden box. Inside are folded cloths and a bundle of letters. The paper is yellowed, the ink fading. She sees Jonathan's name written in the hand of a woman. She understands. These are letters from his late wife. Elizabeth doesn't read them. She gently gathers them and puts them away. That evening, Jonathan sees the box open. His face grows quiet. He speaks slowly. You looked through them. Elizabeth hesitates, then says no. I only saw them. Silence fills the room like dust in the air. Jonathan says nothing. But Elizabeth feels a distance settle in that night. They do not eat together. Jonathan sits outside in the cold. Elizabeth lies under the blanket, but sleep does not come. Spring air flows gently through the open wood, yet the silence in the room stays frozen. The next morning, Elizabeth walks into the fields, past the edge of the village. Her eyes glisten. She blames herself. She only wanted to understand him, to know what he loved, who he loved. Footsteps behind her. Jonathan. He walks slowly and stands by her side. He says softly, I don't blame you. I was afraid. I thought you wouldn't understand, that I haven't forgotten. Elizabeth replies, I never asked you to forget. I wanted to know, because now, I'm part of your story. Jonathan nods. They stand together in the quiet field. Then he says, if you'd like, we can read them together. Elizabeth looks at him. There are no tears now, only a small light in her eyes. That night, they sit together, reading old letters, words written in another time, letters of love, of fear, of longing. Elizabeth listens. She learns she doesn't feel jealousy, she feels connection. She realizes love does not arrive all at once, but understanding builds something deeper. Days pass. They work together. Jonathan chops wood. Elizabeth bakes bread. He teaches her how to start the fire in the stone oven. She shows him how to scent the linen with lavender leaves. They speak more, but they also learn the comfort of silence. One evening, they sit by the stream near the village. Birdsong in the trees. Cool breeze across the grass. Jonathan says, as a boy, I used to draw this stream again and again. My mother said, rivers cry when they're sad, and laugh when they're glad. Elizabeth says softly, tonight the river is laughing. They sit side by side, saying nothing, hearing everything. Spring has fully arrived. Trees where green dot the earth breathes again at night. They drink tea by the window. The candle flickers, their faces blur in the light and shadow. This is no longer just a marriage. It's a friendship, a quiet rhythm, a life formed slowly, like the shaping of stone by rain. Love begins to grow, not in a rush, but like a seed underground, learning the dark before it reaches the light. The days grow longer. Light stays late in the sky. The trees are full now, and the grass has turned deep green. The wooden cottage feels different in summer, warm-lived, in full of small sounds and soft smells. One morning, Elizabeth leans over the basin to wash her face. She feels lightheaded. She pauses, places her hand on her stomach. She doesn't say anything, not yet, but something is changing. She feels it quietly. Inside her, that afternoon, she walks through the village. The sun hangs gently above. She visits the herb woman, an elder named Agnes. Agnes watches her closely, then says, Your eyes have changed, child. Elizabeth asks, is that good or bad? Agnes smiles. It is life, beginning again. That evening, Elizabeth sits by the fire. She looks at Jonathan across the table. The candle between them glows softly. She speaks gently, I think. We are expecting. Jonathan looks up. He freezes. Then slowly, his face breaks into a smile. He stands, walks to her, sits beside her in silence, then says, I don't know what to say. Elizabeth replies, then say nothing. They hold hands, listening to the fire crackle, feeling something grow quietly between them. The next weeks pass slowly. The wind carries the scent of soil and leaves. Elizabeth's steps become softer, slower. She now spends time with the village women. They teach her how to hold a baby, how to fold a swaddle from old cloth, how to mix herbs that calm the stomach. They speak in whispers of pain, of strength, of joy, of being a mother, of not knowing what to do, but trying anyway. Elizabeth writes letters now in a small book she hides under the bed, to the child growing inside her. Letters that begin with my dearest one, whom I have not yet met. She tells the baby about the wind in the pine trees, about Jonathan's quiet kindness, about the way the candle flickers at night. She tells the baby, I was afraid, but now I am not. I do not know how to be a mother, but I will be yours. Jonathan becomes more careful. He helps with water from the well. He learns to fold the blankets properly. He hums when he works soft, tuneless songs. Sometimes, Elizabeth joins him, their voices low, almost like a prayer. On a warm evening, they sit outside. The stars above them blink gently. Elizabeth rests her head on his shoulder. She says, will I be enough? Jonathan replies, you already are. One afternoon, a storm passes through the village. Wind shakes the trees. The sky grows dark. Jonathan and Elizabeth sit inside, listening to the rain hit the roof. Jonathan says, when I was a boy, I feared the sound of thunder. Elizabeth smiles, I still do. They laugh together, as lightning flashes outside. That night, the power goes out. Only the fireplace glows. They sit close, wrapped in the same blanket. Jonathan whispers, you've changed this house. Elizabeth asks, how? He answers, you filled it with something I didn't know was missing. Weeks pass, the child grows. Elizabeth feels it. She begins to talk to the baby. When she bathes, when she sits by the window, when she lies in bed at night, she whispers things only the child can hear. Things she's never told anyone, not even Jonathan. Summer deepens, the wheat fields rise. Children run through the grass. Barefoot life in the village moves gently forward. No noise, no hurry, only time and waiting, and love that grows like roots under the earth. Elizabeth dreams now of lullabies, of tiny fingers in her hand, of soft breathing beside her in the dark. She wakes and holds her stomach. The future is unknown, but it no longer frightens her. Jonathan begins building a small cradle by hand from smooth pine wood. He doesn't talk about it. He just works carefully, lovingly, a gift without words. One morning, Elizabeth finds the cradle by the window. Sunlight spills over it. She touches the wood and smiles. A soft breeze moves through the house. Curtains dance slowly. Birdsong fills the quiet. Their life, once filled with silence, now filled with hope. It is late July now. The air is heavy with warmth, the grass is tall, and soft bees hum through the wildflowers. The cottage is filled with quiet preparation. Something is coming, something new. Elizabeth wakes early. She feels a deep ache in her body. It's not pain, not yet, but a pull, like the earth, calling something forward. She lights a candle. The morning sun has not yet risen. The floor creaks under her feet. She walks slowly to the wooden table, places her hand on her belly. She whispers, "It's time, isn't it?" Jonathan rises at her voice. He doesn't speak. He just stands, alert. Calm. She nods. He walks to the village to fetch the midwife. The wind shifts through the trees. Birds fall silent. Inside the house, the air changes. Elizabeth lies on the bed, eyes closed, breathing slowly. The midwife arrives, an older woman named Miriam. She sets her bag down, touches Elizabeth's hand. "No fear," she says, "only the path that must be walked outside." Jonathan waits. He paces the porch, listens to the silence, listens to the wind, listens to nothing. That kind of nothing that feels full, heavy, alive, inside. Time begins to stretch. The walls feel closer. Elizabeth clenches the sheets. Her breath shortens. The midwife murmurs softly, "You're doing well, my dear." Like the river before it flows. Pain rises and falls. Waves on a dark ocean. Sometimes she screams. Sometimes she sobs. Sometimes she simply stares. The village women arrive quietly. One brings towels. One brings warm water. One brings a prayer. In her whisper, they work as if they've done this 100 times. Because they have. The candlelight flickers. The fire crackles softly. Elizabeth reaches for someone's hand. Anyone's, and a hand is there. She doesn't know whose. It doesn't matter in that moment. It is enough. Outside. Night falls. The stars come out, one by one. The wind is gentle, but inside, the world is fire and storm. Elizabeth is between two worlds now. One foot in pain, one foot in hope. Jonathan still waits. He does not move from the porch. He does not eat. He barely breathes. His eyes stay on the door, waiting. Hours pass. The women murmur low. The midwife whispers, "Almost, my dear." Elizabeth bites down, eyes closed. She feels the world tear open, then soften. A cry. Sharp, clear. Small, but loud enough to change everything. The midwife lifts the child, SWADDLED, and smiles. "It's a daughter," she says. Elizabeth cannot speak. Only tears. Only relief. Only quiet. Shaking breaths, they place the child on her chest. Tiny warmth, tiny heartbeat, a tiny piece of the future. The village women quietly clean the space. Miriam rests her hand on Elizabeth's forehead. "You were brave," she says. Elizabeth closes her eyes, not to sleep, but to feel, to remember this moment. Jonathan steps inside. The room smells of fire and water, and something new. He walks to Elizabeth's side. He doesn't speak, only looks, then sees the baby. His eyes fill. He kneels beside the bed. "Thank you," he whispers. Elizabeth replies, "She is ours." That night, they do not sleep, not really. They hold the child. Take turns listening to her breathe. The candle stays lit. The world stays still outside. The wind rustles the trees inside. Three hearts beat gently together. A new life has begun. After the child's birth, time seemed to pause. The house was no longer silent. It echoed with new sounds, tiny cries, gentle breathing, the flicker of candlelight. On new life, Elizabeth no longer slept deeply. She stayed awake beside the child. Sometimes, she just watched her daughter sleep, as if she were made of something divine. Jonathan folded blankets, kept the bed warm, sat by the child at night in silence. He no longer seemed distant. Even his quiet carried stories now. They named the baby Hope. In that quiet old cottage, she was a burst of sunlight. Hope cried, laughed, slept. And two people, Elizabeth and Jonathan, learned life again by watching her eyes. The seasons changed. Summer passed. Leaves fell. Rain came. Then snow. But inside the house, warmth remained. Tea on the table. Blankets tucked in. Short stories, and the soft breath of a child. Hope began to walk tiny footsteps across the wooden floor. Elizabeth would say, "Careful." Jonathan would say, "She's strong." They would laugh together. Nothing grand happened in those 2 years. Their world was small, but full. A small cradle, an old fireplace, a window full of sun, and 3 hearts beating under one roof. Elizabeth told Hope stories, old tales. Her mother used to tell her. Hope would cover her eyes and whisper, "Again." And Elizabeth would smile and begin the story again. One day, Hope asked, "Papa, did you build this house?" Jonathan smiled and said, "No, sweetheart. We built it together." Elizabeth said nothing, but her eyes shimmered, because she knew this house was once Jonathan's loneliness. Now it was their home of love. Years passed slowly. One morning, Jonathan said, "I want to show you something." He took Elizabeth and Hope into the woods behind the house. He dug under an old tree and brought out a wooden box. Inside those old letters, the ones from another life. Jonathan said, "These are my past, what I lost and what I gained. They both live here. If you want, we can burn them." Elizabeth didn't reply. She looked at Hope. Hope said, "No, Papa, keep them. When I grow up, I want to read them." Jonathan stared at his daughter and smiled. He understood. The greatest legacy is a story. That evening, they sat by the window. The candle glowed. Hope had fallen asleep. Elizabeth asked, "Did you ever imagine life would turn out this way?" Jonathan replied, "No, but what you built here, I could never have dreamed it." The night grew deeper. Moonlight on the WINDOWSILL. Silence wrapped the cottage, but 3 heartbeats pulsed within it. One day this house will be gone, its wood will rot, the field will turn dry, but these moments, these breaths, this love will stay buried deep in the quiet soil of time. They didn't know what the future held. They only knew this: the 3 of them were together, in an old wooden home, living a new story. If this story brought you a moment of peace, stay with us for more like it. Subscribe now, so that on another quiet night, you can return to sleep, to stillness, and to stories from the past.